There's a small cafe tucked behind the square where the city quiets, not entirely, but just enough to make the sounds feel softer, like they're filtered through light and wood and steam. The kind of place where you forget to check the time because the clock above the counter is always a few minutes wrong, and no one ever bothers to fix it. It isn't famous. It doesn't have a name you'd recognize. But if you sit by the window, just as the afternoon starts folding into evening, you'll see the way the sun leans in through the glass like it's trying to stay just a little longer. I hadn't meant to be there that day. I wasn't late, exactly, but I was lost in thought, the kind of quiet, circular thinking that fills your head after a long, uneventful week. I was supposed to meet a friend for coffee across town, but they canceled last minute, and I found myself wandering without intention. The cafe pulled me in the way certain places do when you're moving slowly enough to notice them: warm lights, empty chairs, the sound of a spoon stirring in a cup. The table by the window was open. It was round, small, tucked into the corner where the sunlight pooled and the street outside blurred into a moving watercolor of feet and bicycles and soft conversation. I sat without thinking, placed my book on the table, ordered something familiar. The waitress smiled when I gave her my order, not in the way of a stranger being polite, but with the subtle surprise of someone who expected someone else. I didn't think about it at the time. It was only after I'd taken my first sip of coffee, after I'd opened the book and let my eyes lose focus somewhere between lines, that she arrived. I didn't notice her walk in. She simply appeared. A coat the color of dried rose petals. A scarf tied loosely at the neck. Hair pinned up but already slipping free in deliberate disarray. She didn't scan the room. She looked only at me. And she stopped. Not angrily. Not confused. Just still. Like something she had rehearsed had gone slightly off script. She was carrying a small notebook and a pen, nothing else, and when I met her gaze, I felt a flicker of something I didn't have a name for yet. It wasn't recognition. But it wasn't unfamiliarity either. Then, softly, she said, "That's my table." I opened my mouth to apologize, already half rising from my seat, but she raised a hand, not to stop me, but to calm the moment. She glanced around, saw the other empty tables, and then returned her gaze to me. "No," she added, after a breath, I come here every Saturday. At this exact time. I always sit here. I think they even keep it for me now, though I've never asked." I looked around. No sign on the table. Nothing reserved. Just a seat. A window. A coincidence. Or something else. I offered to move. She hesitated. And then, with the faintest smile, almost a question more than a statement, she asked if she could sit with me instead. And I said yes. We didn't talk much at first. She opened her notebook and began to write. I returned to my book, though the words refused to settle. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was aware. There's a certain kind of stillness that happens when two people share space before knowing what they mean to each other, a space not yet named, but already gently folding inward. Occasionally, I glanced at her. The way she held the pen. The way her lips moved slightly when she reread what she'd written. The way her eyes never strayed far from the edge of the window, as if she were always half watching for something, or someone, beyond the glass. And then she asked, without looking up, "What made you sit here?" I didn't have an answer that made sense. So I told her the truth. It felt like the right place to be. She smiled again, this time wider, though still quiet, and wrote something down. We sat there for an hour. Maybe longer. When she left, she didn't say goodbye. She just folded her notebook, stood slowly, and with a glance at the table, not at me, said, "Maybe next week, it'll be your table." Then she was gone. And I sat there long after the coffee cooled. The following Saturday, at the exact same time, I returned. And the table was empty. Until it wasn't. The following Saturday, I arrived 5 minutes earlier than before. The table by the window was empty, though a folded napkin had already been placed at its center, like a quiet signal that someone had claimed it before the cafe even opened. I hesitated, unsure whether to wait nearby or sit down again and trust the moment the way I had trusted it once before. But something about the light spilling across the floor, and the faint scent of cinnamon drifting from the kitchen, made the choice for me. I sat. This time, I ordered 2 coffees. I wasn't certain she would come. It had been, after all, just a single encounter, brief, spontaneous, untethered to anything resembling a plan. But that first hour had left an imprint on my days in a way that felt disproportionate to the time we'd actually spent together. I found myself replaying the way she looked at the world through the window, the way she spoke as if everything she said had already been considered in silence. There was a rhythm to her, subtle but compelling, like the way certain poems breathe between lines. At exactly 3:05 p.m., she walked through the door. Same coat. Same scarf. Same slow, deliberate steps that made her feel like part of the room before she even reached the table. She paused when she saw me, not surprised, but measuring something. I couldn't tell if it was relief or recognition, or both. She lowered herself into the chair across from me without a word. Then she glanced at the 2 cups. "You remembered how I take it?" she asked quietly. "No," I admitted. "I just guessed. But I brought sugar, just in case." She smiled, that same quiet smile that never tried to fill the space, only soften it. We didn't speak much that second time. She wrote in her notebook. I half-read a magazine I'd brought more as a prop than a necessity. Occasionally, we looked up at the same time, and something unspoken moved between us, not flirtation, not tension, just a gentle awareness that we were both choosing to be there. Not because we had to, but because we wanted to. By the 4th Saturday, we had a ritual. We no longer pretended to be strangers. She would arrive with her notebook and sit down before I could stand to greet her. I had stopped arriving early, she always beat me there. Now I ordered for both of us, and each week, we tried a different pastry and quietly ranked it together at the end, writing numbers in the corners of napkins we never threw away. She told me she was a writer, though she rarely said what kind. I said I wasn't sure what I was yet, only that lately, sitting with her made me feel more like myself than most days spent in my actual life. Sometimes, she would read to me. Not her own writing, never that. But lines she had underlined in books. Poems she carried with her in fragments, folded into her thoughts. Once, she leaned across the table and whispered, "I like the way you listen. Like the words land somewhere they can rest." And it was then I realized how much of her lived in subtleties. She never said anything directly. But everything she said mattered. One rainy afternoon in late April, we stayed longer than usual. The café had emptied out, the sky thick with gray, and the lights inside cast a golden hush across the wooden floorboards. She rested her head against the window frame and closed her eyes for a moment, as if letting the day slow her heartbeat. And then she said, without looking at me, "I used to come here with someone." Her voice was even, but quieter than usual. A little held in. He loved this table. Said it was the only place in the city that didn't feel rushed. After he left, I started coming alone. At first to remember. Then just because. I didn't ask who he was. I didn't ask why he left. I didn't need to. The way she spoke told me enough, that it had mattered, that it had changed her, but that it no longer defined her. "And now?" I asked gently. She turned to face me. "I think," she said slowly, "now I come because I don't have to remember anymore. I just get to be here." That day, when we parted, she slipped a folded page from her notebook across the table before leaving. She didn't say anything about it. Just placed it gently beside my coffee and walked out into the rain. I waited until I got home to open it. There was only one line. "If this table is yours now, maybe I am too." I read it again under the soft light of my kitchen lamp, and the silence of my apartment didn't feel empty the way it used to. It felt full. As if her presence had followed me home in the folds of paper and in the memory of how she held her cup with both hands when she listened closely. The next Saturday, I brought flowers, small, quiet ones that matched the season. I placed them in a jar at the center of our table. She arrived. She didn't say anything. She just smiled. And sat down. And we stayed there, long after the coffee cooled. As the light faded through the windows. And the world outside kept moving without us.